The wind carried the faint scent of rain through the narrow alleyways of a quiet seaside town. Old fishing boats creaked against their ropes, and the sun sank slowly into the horizon, painting the water gold. In one of the small houses near the dock lived Evelyn, a woman in her early 40s whose eyes carried both kindness and fatigue, the kind that comes from years of unspoken regret. Every morning, she opened the little bakery her late husband had built. The bell above the door chimed each time someone entered, a sound that once made her smile, but now only reminded her of promises she had failed to keep. 12 years ago, her daughter Lila had left home after a terrible fight. Evelyn hadn't heard from her since. What began as a disagreement over college choices had turned into a storm of cruel words, ones that neither of them could take back. Evelyn had told her daughter she was selfish, ungrateful, and destined to fail without guidance. Lila had replied that her mother cared more about control than love. Then she was gone. Since that day, Evelyn had replayed that fight in her mind like a broken record. She wrote dozens of letters to her daughter, but never sent them. She would light a candle each night and whisper a quiet prayer into the empty room, hoping that somewhere out there, her daughter might forgive her. The townspeople loved Evelyn. She was generous, always offering pastries to children or giving away bread to those who couldn't afford it. But no one knew about the ache she carried, or how she would sometimes stand by the window at closing time, staring at the sea as if it might carry her daughter's voice back to her. One cold autumn morning, a young woman entered the bakery. Her hair was tied up messily under a hood, her eyes tired from travel. She hesitated by the door before approaching the counter. "Hi," she said softly. "One coffee, please. And maybe a croissant." Evelyn smiled automatically, but something about the girl's tone made her heart skip. She looked closer. The face was older, sharper, but the eyes. Those eyes were the same soft brown she had once kissed goodnight. Her hands trembled. "Lila." The girl froze, her expression tightening. For a few long seconds, they just stared at each other, a mother and daughter divided by time, pride, and pain. "I didn't know you still worked here," Lila said finally, her voice neutral, almost cold. "I never left," Evelyn whispered. This was always home." Lila's eyes flicked toward the window. Home stopped being home a long time ago. The silence that followed was heavy, full of everything they hadn't said for 12 years. Evelyn wanted to reach across the counter, to hold her daughter's hands, to ask 1,000 questions. "Are you okay? Where have you been? Did you ever think of me?" But the words got stuck behind her tears. Lila set down a few coins. "Keep the change," she said, grabbing her coffee. But before she could leave, Evelyn spoke. "Please, don't go. Just sit for a moment." Lila hesitated, her jaw tightening. Something inside her, maybe exhaustion, maybe curiosity, gave in. She sat by the window. Evelyn brought her a small plate of pastries, just like she used to when Lila was a teenager studying late at night. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. The rain began to fall outside, soft and steady. It was Evelyn who finally broke the quiet. "You look so much like your father," she said, voice trembling. "He'd be so proud of you." Lila looked up. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't talk about him." Evelyn flinched. "Lila, you think you can just say that and everything's fine?" Her daughter's voice cracked. "You don't get to use his memory to make yourself feel better." Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes. "I'm not trying to. I miss him. And I miss you." Lila's lips trembled for a moment, but she looked away. "You had your chance, Mom. You made it clear who was right and who was wrong. You told me I'd fail without you. Well, I didn't. I never wanted you to fail," Evelyn whispered. "I was scared. You were so young, and the world didn't hurt me, Mom. You did." The words hit Evelyn like a blade. She couldn't argue, not this time. The truth was there, undeniable. They sat in silence as thunder rolled in the distance. Lila's fingers traced the edge of her cup. Evelyn wanted to reach across and hold them, but she was afraid the smallest gesture might make her daughter walk away again. Then Lila sighed. "I came back because I needed to see it for myself," she said quietly. "The house. The bakery. You. I'm moving abroad next month, and I didn't want to leave with this weight anymore." "Abroad," Evelyn repeated softly. "Where?" "It doesn't matter." Evelyn nodded slowly, forcing a faint smile. "Then I'm glad you came, even if it's just for coffee." For the first time, Lila's eyes softened, just a little. The anger didn't vanish, but it flickered, uncertain. You always say things like that, she murmured. Simple. Kind. Like it fixes everything. Evelyn looked down. It doesn't fix anything, but it's all I can offer. Outside, the rain fell harder, blurring the world beyond the glass. Inside, two hearts, once bound by love, then torn by pride, began to circle the fragile possibility of healing. When Lila finally stood to leave, Evelyn walked her to the door. Lila, she whispered, voice trembling, if you ever need anything, or if you ever want to come home. Her daughter hesitated in the doorway, the bell chiming softly above them. I'll think about it, she said. And then she was gone, disappearing into the rain. Evelyn stood there for a long time, her hands pressed against the counter, her tears falling silently onto the wood. She didn't know if Lila would ever come back, but for the first time in years, she felt a tiny spark of something fragile and real. Hope. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and whispered to the empty room, come home safe, my love. The storm that night lasted until dawn. The sea raged against the cliffs, and the old bakery shutters rattled in the wind. Evelyn barely slept. She lay awake listening to the rain, replaying every word her daughter had said. You hurt me, Mom. She had whispered it so quietly, but it echoed louder than thunder. Evelyn's chest ached with a mixture of guilt and longing that refused to fade. When morning came, the world smelled of wet earth and salt. The bakery was quiet, too quiet. Even the regulars noticed. Rough night, Miss Evelyn? Asked old Mr. Gray, the fisherman who came for his daily loaf. She smiled faintly. Something like that. He looked at her kindly, his weathered face soft. Sometimes the tide brings back what we thought we'd lost, he said, nodding toward the sea. You just have to wait for the right current. Evelyn wanted to believe that. She really did. That afternoon, she sat behind the counter, staring at a small piece of paper she had pulled from the trash, the receipt from Lila's purchase. Her daughter's handwriting was still elegant and precise. L. Hale. She had even signed it with the same small swirl at the end. Evelyn took a deep breath and turned the receipt over. Then, in trembling letters, she wrote, I'm sorry, not for wanting the best for you, but for not knowing what that really meant. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. She tucked it into a small envelope and addressed it to Lila Hale. General delivery, London, hoping the post office could forward it if Lila had already left, for the first time in years. Evelyn sent one of her letters. Lila received it a week later. She was sitting in a small apartment on the outskirts of London, surrounded by moving boxes and the smell of paint. Her roommate, Cassie, handed her the envelope with a teasing grin. From your mom again? Lila hesitated. First time in 12 years. Cassie raised her brows. 12 years. Girl, that's not a letter. That's a ghost coming back from the dead. Lila didn't laugh. Her fingers lingered on the seal before finally opening it. The paper smelled faintly of cinnamon, the scent that used to cling to her mother's clothes. When she read the short message, her throat tightened. It wasn't long or poetic. It didn't beg or justify. It just admitted something real. She folded it back carefully, holding it like something fragile. Cassie was watching her with quiet curiosity. You okay? Lila nodded slowly. Yeah, just surprised. Cassie sat beside her. You ever think maybe she's changed? Lila exhaled sharply. People don't change. They just get better at hiding who they are. But even as she said it, a part of her knew that wasn't entirely true. She had seen something in her mother's eyes that day, something raw and broken, like a mirror cracked too many times, but still reflecting a bit of light. She placed the letter on her desk, meaning to throw it away later. But when she went to sleep that night, she tucked it into her journal instead. Meanwhile, back in the seaside town, Evelyn's days began to feel different. She started waking up earlier, baking more, and smiling a little easier. Not because everything was fixed, but because the act of trying gave her purpose again. She had learned something about forgiveness. It wasn't a one-time act. It was a slow, daily choice to face the pain, to admit the wrong, and to keep hoping anyway. One morning, she received a small postcard. It was simple, with a watercolor of a lighthouse. I got your letter. Thank you. I'm not ready to come back yet, but I'm glad you wrote. L. Asterisk. Evelyn traced the little initial at the end with her fingertip. For the first time in years, she smiled and truly meant it. Weeks turned into months. Lila started a new job at a design firm in London. She was good at it, creative, focused, ambitious. But no matter how many hours she worked, something felt missing. One Friday, she was tasked with designing a new branding campaign for a chain of small family cafes. The project required her to research local bakeries for authentic storytelling. Scrolling through photos online, she froze when she saw a familiar storefront, Evelyn's Bakery, EST 1992, the same faded blue door, the same gold lettering on the window. Someone had taken a beautiful photo for a local travel blog, her mother standing in front, holding a tray of bread, smiling. The caption read, "A bakery built on love, loss, and second chances." Lila's breath caught. She clicked the article, reading every word. The writer had interviewed locals who spoke about Evelyn's kindness, how she gave free meals to widows, donated bread to schools, and helped rebuild the community center after a storm. But what struck Lila most was one quote from her mother at the end of the piece. "I've learned that we can't change the past, but we can choose what grows from it. Even broken things can bloom again, if given care." Lila closed her laptop. The words wouldn't leave her. That weekend, she took the train to the coast without telling anyone. It was evening when she arrived. The town hadn't changed much. The same cobblestone streets, the same smell of salt and sugar in the air. But the bakery windows glowed warmly against the dark sky. She stood outside for a long time before entering. The bell above the door chimed, that familiar sound from her childhood. Evelyn looked up from behind the counter. For a second, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But then she saw those same brown eyes, filled with hesitation and something softer. Not anger this time, but uncertainty. "Lila," she whispered. "Hi, Mom." The word Mom almost broke her. Evelyn came around the counter slowly, afraid to move too fast. "You came back." Lila shrugged. "I had a work thing nearby." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Evelyn didn't question it. She simply nodded and gestured toward the same table by the window. "Your favorite spot's still here." They sat in silence at first, both unsure where to begin. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "I saw your postcard. I didn't expect to hear from you again, but I was grateful." "I didn't expect to send it," Lila admitted. "But your letter, it felt different. Like you weren't trying to defend yourself this time." "I'm done defending myself," Evelyn said softly. "I just want to listen now." Something in her tone made Lila's guard lower slightly. She took a sip of coffee, glancing around. The bakery was exactly as she remembered. Same warm colors, same smell of vanilla and bread. It felt like stepping into a memory she wasn't sure she wanted to relive. "I read that article about you," she said after a moment. "The one about the bakery." Evelyn's cheeks flushed. "Oh, I didn't know you'd see that. You said something about broken things blooming again." Lila hesitated. "Do you really believe that?" Evelyn nodded. "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of all this?" She gestured around the bakery. "If I didn't believe people could grow, I'd still be the same woman who pushed her daughter away 12 years ago." The words hung between them. Lila looked down, her voice quiet. "You didn't just push me away, Mom. You made me feel small, like my dreams didn't matter." "I know," Evelyn said, tears welling. "And I hate that I did that. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was build walls you couldn't climb." Silence again. Only the sound of rain outside. Then, unexpectedly, Lila reached across the table and touched her mother's hand. It was hesitant, brief, but real. "I'm still angry," she said. "But I'm tired of carrying it." Evelyn squeezed her fingers. "You don't have to forgive me today. Just, let's start small. Coffee. Conversation. No expectations." Lila managed a small smile. "I think I can do that." They sat together until closing, talking about little things, work, neighbors, even old recipes. Nothing deep, but it didn't have to be. For the first time in years, it felt natural. When Lila left, Evelyn stood in the doorway watching her walk into the misty night. This time, her heart didn't ache with regret. It ached with something gentler. Maybe healing didn't come in grand gestures. Maybe it came in small, quiet moments. Like this one. Later that night, Lila sat in her rented room at the inn, staring at the old lighthouse through the rain-speckled window. She thought of her mother's face, older, softer, and infinitely sadder than she remembered. But beneath the sadness was something steady and strong. Maybe she really has changed. For the first time in years, Lila felt the weight on her chest ease. She didn't know what the future held, whether she'd stay, leave again, or ever fully forgive. But she knew one thing. She wanted to try. She picked up her phone and sent a message. "Thanks for the coffee, Mom. Maybe next time, dinner?" Evelyn saw it an hour later. Her hands trembled as she read it. Then, smiling through her tears, she typed back, "I'd love that, sweetheart. Always, outside." The sea whispered softly against the shore, no longer angry, but calm, as if the world itself had decided to forgive. The months after Lila's visit passed like a slow exhale, not filled with dramatic change, but with something subtler, quieter, peace trying to return to places that had long forgotten it. Evelyn found herself humming again while baking, something she hadn't done in years. She'd glance at her phone every morning, half hoping to see a new message from Lila. Sometimes one arrived, sometimes not. But that was okay. Healing had its own rhythm, like the sea's endless tide. They texted once a week, then twice. A photo here, a small update there. Lila sent her pictures of London sunsets and crowded cafes. Evelyn replied with snapshots of her bread rising, of morning light falling through the bakery window. Neither said, "I forgive you." Neither said, "I'm sorry again." They didn't need to. Forgiveness had shifted from words into small acts of presence, steady, patient, real. One Sunday in early autumn, Evelyn was preparing the bakery for a local charity event when she heard a familiar laugh outside. She looked up and froze. Lila stood there, suitcase in hand, her hair windblown, her face tired but bright. "I thought you said you couldn't make it," Evelyn said. Rushing out to meet her, Lila smiled. "My meeting got canceled. Thought I'd crash your fundraiser instead." Evelyn wanted to hug her, but stopped herself. "You're always welcome to crash anything of mine." Lila laughed softly. "We'll see if I still feel that way after a few hours of washing dishes." The event was simple, a bake sale for the town's new youth center. Evelyn watched in quiet pride as her daughter worked the tables, charming the guests, selling cakes with that confident, easy grace she'd always had. Every so often, Lila caught her mother watching. She didn't look away anymore. Later, when the crowd thinned, they sat outside with tea and leftover pastries. The sun dipped low over the ocean, painting everything gold. "It's strange," Lila said, breaking a long silence. "Coming back here feels different now. Not easier, just different." Evelyn nodded. "Sometimes the place changes after we do." Lila traced her finger along the rim of her cup. "You know, I used to think moving away was the only way to heal. But distance doesn't really erase things, does it?" "No," Evelyn said softly. "It just gives us space to face them." That evening, as Lila helped clean the bakery, she found an old photograph pinned to the corkboard near the back. Her as a little girl, flour on her cheeks, holding a loaf of bread bigger than her head. Her mother stood beside her, smiling proudly. Lila stared at it for a long time. "You kept this up all these years?" Evelyn looked over. "It reminded me of who I used to be. Before the shouting, before the silence." Lila touched the photo gently. "I miss her too, the version of us from back then." "Maybe we can find pieces of her again," Evelyn said. "Not the same, but something close." For the first time, Lila didn't flinch from the suggestion. A week later, Lila extended her visit. Then another. Soon, she was helping with morning prep, experimenting with designs for the bakery's new logo, bringing modern touches to its classic charm. The townsfolk adored her. "You're your mother's daughter, through and through." They said AT first. Lila resisted that idea, but slowly, she found comfort in it. Not because she wanted to be like her mother, but because it meant they shared something good after all. One evening, after closing, they walked along the shore. The waves shimmered under the moonlight. "You know," Lila said, "I used to think you cared more about being right than being close." Evelyn nodded. "I did. I thought love meant control. That protecting you meant keeping you from pain, even if it meant causing my own." Lila looked at her. "You can't protect people from growing." "I know that now," Evelyn whispered. They stood in silence, listening to the sea. Then Evelyn added, "When you left, I blamed myself every day. But I also blamed you. It took me years to admit that it wasn't your fault you wanted something different." Lila's eyes softened. "And it wasn't your fault for wanting to hold on." The words landed gently between them, not sharp, not defensive, just true. Sometimes truth doesn't cut. It heals. Months later, as winter approached, Lila returned to London for a project. But something inside her had shifted. The distance between them was no longer a wound. It was simply geography. Every Sunday, they spoke over video call, baking the same recipe in two different kitchens, laughing at the same mistakes. Once, Lila burned her bread completely. Still tastes like forgiveness. Evelyn joked. Lila snorted. Forgiveness tastes like charcoal then. Sometimes it does, her mother replied with a smile. Then came the call no one expects. One stormy evening. Evelyn collapsed in the bakery after closing. A mild heart attack, the doctors said. Not severe, but enough to force rest. When Lila got the call, she didn't hesitate. Within hours, she was on the first train back to the coast. She arrived at the hospital before dawn. Her mother was pale but awake, hooked up to monitors, looking impossibly small beneath the white sheets. Hey, Lila whispered, sitting beside her. Evelyn's eyes fluttered open. Hey yourself. You didn't have to come so fast. You scared me. Guess I needed to remind you that I'm still human. Evelyn tried to joke, but her voice cracked. Lila took her hand. Firm, steady. Don't do that again. I'll try not to. They sat quietly for a while. Then Evelyn said, You know, if this had happened years ago, I think I would have been terrified of dying with regrets. But not anymore. Because we talked? Lila asked. Because we found our way back. Tears welled in Lila's eyes. I wasted so much time being angry. No, Evelyn whispered. You used that time to grow. You wouldn't be you without it. The heart monitor beeped softly in rhythm with their silence. For the first time, Lila realized how fragile and sacred reconciliation really was. Evelyn recovered slowly. Lila stayed in town longer, helping her through recovery. Managing the bakery. One day, Evelyn handed her a folder filled with documents, bank records, property deeds, the bakery's future plans. What's all this? Lila asked. I'm naming you co-owner. Lila blinked. What? Mom, I live in. Evelyn held up a hand. I know. You have your life in London. But this place, it's part of you too. Whether you're here or not, it should carry both our names. Lila stared at the papers. The words Hale and Daughter Bakery were printed in elegant gold across the top. Emotion caught in her throat. You really mean that? Evelyn nodded. You taught me that love isn't about holding on. It's about sharing what we've built and trusting it will continue, even when we're apart. Lila smiled through tears. Then let's make it official. They signed together, ink sealing what words had already healed. A year later, Evelyn sat on a bench outside the bakery, watching children chase gulls near the shore. A new sign hung above the door. Hale and Daughter Bakery, EST 1992. Reborn 2025. Lila had returned for the grand reopening. This time not as a guest, but as family. Truly, fully, they cut the ribbon together. Laughter mingling with the ocean breeze. As the crowd cheered, Evelyn whispered, You know, I used to think karma was punishment, the universe's way of teaching lessons through pain. But now I think it's balance. It gives back what we give, good or bad, eventually. Lila nodded. Then maybe this is our karma. All the hurt turned into something worth keeping. Exactly, Evelyn said, squeezing her hand. What goes around doesn't always come back to hurt us. Sometimes it returns to heal us. That night, long after the bakery closed, they walked along the pier. The moon hung low over the water. Lila leaned on the railing. Do you ever wish things had been different? Evelyn thought for a moment. Sometimes. But if they were, maybe we wouldn't have learned how to forgive or how to love properly. Lila smiled faintly. You know what's strange? For so long I wanted to forget everything that happened. Now I don't. It's part of who we are. Scars are proof we've lived, Evelyn said. They stood together in the cool night air. The sound of waves steady and soft, like a heartbeat shared between two souls who had finally found peace. Years later, after Evelyn passed away quietly in her sleep, the bakery continued to thrive. Lila expanded it, opened another branch in London, and often told stories of the small seaside shop that started it all. In every loaf she baked, in every letter she wrote, she carried her mother's lessons about pride, forgiveness, and how love can outlast even the worst mistakes. On the counter of the original bakery sat a small framed quote, written in Evelyn's handwriting. Even broken things can bloom again, if given care. Visitors would often stop to read it. Some smiled, some teared up. Few realized it was more than a motto. It was a legacy, and every evening, as the waves kissed the shore outside. It felt as though the world itself whispered the story again, a story about karma, redemption, and the quiet miracle of second chances.